Hello, everyone. Welcome to our latest Dewey Data Seminar. Really excited about this one. I love this topic and I love the company that we're working with here because I've had a chance to work around and play with their data a little bit. And I think is going to be super timely to a lot of the things we see in terms of posts I've been seeing in news articles and stuff like that. So we're going to talk today with the LinkUp team, along with some researchers about job posting data and how we're seeing the AI economy being reshaped with where jobs are being posted and where hiring is happening. So really excited to dive into this topic. Before we jump in, we do want this to be participatory. So we're going to start with a quick poll, which we'll go ahead and launch now, just to because we're on the topic of AI, we kind of want to understand from our academic and university-based researchers, or if you're not based in a university, I'm just curious to learn a little bit more about who is kind of funding your AI tool access today. Is it part of your university? Are you paying it out of pocket? Are you using free tools? So just wanted to kind of get the juices flowing here as we get a little bit of time for people to log in before we get started. Awesome. All right, we should be able to see the results here in 1 second. Oops. Uh-oh, I didn't see the results. Maybe we can share those in. There they are. Okay, most people do have a university one. No one's using free. I like to see that. Awesome. Okay, well, before we jump in further, I want to do a quick introduction. So I'm Evan. I'm the CEO and founder of Dewey Data. These sessions are recorded, and so we, don't have to worry about scrambling or taking notes. You'll automatically get a recording after the session, and you're welcome to share that with any, collaborators or co-authors that you're working with. Like I said, we do want this to be participatory, so please use the Q&A or the chat feature. My job here today is going to be to kind of moderate the session. So as questions come in, please use that chat. I might even interrupt our panelists to make sure those questions get in at a timely manner, so we're not saving them all for the end. So it really helps if you ask questions, and then anything we can't get to, of course, we will try our best to follow up. So if you see a lot of questions in there, don't hesitate. Please ask, and we'll try to get through as many as we can. And then lastly, because LinkUp, is a great partner of Dewey Data, if you want to follow along and kind of sample and see the data firsthand, you can create an account at app.deweydata.io, and you'll be able to see a lot more about their data on the Dewey platform. Great. So what we're going to cover first, we're going to talk with a few folks from the LinkUp team. We're going to go deep into a data overview of what they offer. And what I'm actually really excited about is to learn more about the methodology of how this data is collected. I think this is where companies can really stand out and be unique in that methodology. And I think this is why we love being a partner with LinkUp is the methodology that goes into how this data is actually collected. And then talk about a little bit of this generative AI research and how it's potentially affecting some of the job market. And then we'll answer any questions again at the end that we don't get to. So for brief introductions, I'll let them introduce themselves further, but we have Nick and Matt from the LinkUp team and Faezeh from Georgia State, who's going to present our research after that. And Nick and Matt, I think I will just turn it over to you now.
Sounds good. Thanks, Evan. Just so to do a quick introduction, my name is Matt Trocke. I am product manager here at LinkUp. So I work with our various teams on kind of hearing what is needed out in the market and then creating new features or new data sets within the data to bring those to our clients and prospective clients. Nick, do you want to give a quick intro as well?
Yeah, sure. I'm Nick. Work here at LinkUp, data solutions manager. So I'll work a lot with our clients, getting them set up, making sure they're using the data correctly, kind of getting them to the right data sets, as well as a lot of time with some of our academic partners and clients, just helping them with their research and being collaborative in that aspect.
Nice. All right, so let me get into a quick history of LinkUp before we talk a little bit more about the data set. So LinkUp actually started working with jobs data in the early 2000s. We actually started as a publisher of newspapers. So we got into about 30 different metropolitan areas where we were publishing and distributing newspapers with jobs classified so people could figure out what jobs were available in the job market and get connected with those employers. As the times changed, LinkUp evolved with the job market and became a leading provider of job board data. So we had our own job board, but we also powered job boards, other job boards, even our main competitors, because of the quality of the data and how we source our data. And then since then, we've sold off that side of the business and we've gone all in on the alternative data market. So we are a leading provider of job market data, job openings that we get directly from company career websites that we scrape those from. So why we think our data is so valuable is a lot of the traditional sources of data, government data, have just become less trusted over the years. The way that they collect data, survey data has just become less responsive and just less trusting in the way that people provide and collect that data. Also, volatility just in the way that the people that are in charge of that data, any political motivations have also caused degradation in the trust in that data, as well as technology, especially with AI, has just kind of changed the way that the jobs landscape is showing up over time. So we think that with the consistency of LinkUp's methodology, how we collect the data, and just the history that we have, it is really advantageous in this market and just the value that our end users can get out of our data. So what is in the data set? So LinkUp data has 350 million historical job records that go back to 2007. 2007 is when we started going to employers to scrape that data and put it in the newspapers that we were publishing, and then also the job boards that we were powering at that point. Today, we have about 5,000 active daily records. So that means the companies that we are scraping, there are 5 million open jobs on the career sites that we're scraping. Historically, we've had about 86,000 companies. We're adding about 1,000 to 1,500 companies every month. So in about a year, we'll break that 100,000 company threshold. And it is a global data set. So you'll see there's 195 countries that we have jobs for within the data set. We also do some things that enrich the data set, make it more user-friendly. So we do ONET tagging. So each job that we get within the data set gets an ONET code that will classify the type of job that is. We also scrape companies that are in all different sectors. So we have 7 different employer types. Those are public companies, private companies, nonprofits. We have K through 12, universities and colleges, and then local and federal government jobs. And then the main kind of differentiator of LinkUp compared to other players in this space is just the quality and the rigor around our data. So as you can see here, we go out to each individual company website. We're running scrapes on a daily basis, 24/7, 365. And you can see with our scrape successful run rate, it is near 100%. And those ones that do fail, we have a data quality team that gets on those within a day or two. So let's talk about the methodology and how we get the data that makes the data set so valuable. So as I described earlier, we set up scrapes that go directly to a company's website. So if we're scraping Target or Tesla, we go to those companies' career websites and we set up a scrape for that individual website. We have a dedicated scrape team that is setting up these scrapes on a daily basis and then also maintaining them. They are manually doing QA. So when they set up a scrape and there's 2,000 jobs on a company's website, they'll set up the scrape, run it, and make sure that they are capturing 2,000 jobs and all the data on that website that's available is coming into our database. Another thing that sets us apart is just our data quality monitoring. So we have checks and balances within our scrape system. So if we see any kind of suspicious behavior, a company, their jobs go up 20% in one day or down 50% in one day, that'll get flagged by the QA system. We'll go to our data quality team to investigate. If they find anything that needs to be worked through, they'll send that over to our scrape team to fix it and get it working the way that it should be. Next thing is we have a jobs data engine. So that actually cleans and normalizes the data so it's very easy to use by our end users. And then we do additional tagging with the data. So the main tags that we do on a daily basis are that ONET occupation tag. So it allows end users to look only at you know technology jobs, retail jobs, restaurant jobs, whatever they're interested in, they can slice and dice the data based off of those occupation codes. Other exciting things that we're doing, and we'll talk about this later in the presentation, is some additional things that we're doing with the data set to make it more useful for all of our different clients across the board. But as you can see over the last month, we've rolled out some extracted salary data. So what that is doing is it's going in the job posting and finding any salary data and making that available in a separate file or table. So you can see any jobs that have that available. You can see what the salary is. We are also rolling out our own skills taxonomy within the next month or so. So you guys will see that in the data set where it'll be extracting out skills on the job posting so you can see the individual skills that employers are working with. And at a macro level, you'll be able to see how skills have changed over time and what skills are more in demand and less in demand over time as well. Also, we enhance the data, so we do have company reference data. So each company within the data set will get a NAICS code. So that'll allow the end user to look into just specific industries if they want to. So if they just want to look in the construction industry or retail industry or tech industry, those codes allow the end users to kind of segment the labor market into just the markets that they're interested in. It also allows them to segment the market to see how those industries have changed over time. If an end user isn't interested in just the raw data, we do also aggregation. So if you just want to know raw counts instead of go into the job postings themselves, we do have aggregates that are available at a company, geography, and industry level as well. So if you're not as interested in what's actually in the job postings, but just the raw numbers, we run those on a daily and monthly basis. I think that's everything I want to go through with methodology. Evan, any questions that are coming up with methodology or kind of what makes LinkUp kind of a differentiator in the space?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to chime in myself and say that I think what's I've noticed too, just working with, a lot of providers in this space and also being coming from the data vendor side myself, is I think so much of the value of what these companies do is like post scraping, right? Like the scraping, everyone thinks is like, oh, it's just scrape data, but there's so much that goes into the taxonomy and standardization, normalization, cleaning, deduping. Like I think that oftentimes gets like kind of passed over, and I think it's really important and helpful to understand how many steps are in that to really get a good end data product, especially when you're thinking about the scale at which you have. And so I think the quality of your data has certainly stood out in terms of how much work you put into it, not just the fact that it exists itself is part one of that. And then I think part two, especially from an academic researcher lens, from what I've seen and what I know, I think your historical coverage is very impressive and going, back, what was it, 2007 or something like that. I think that type of historical coverage from an academic researcher's point of view is super, super valuable. So I think those are two things that I've noticed just looking at the data from my lens have been super helpful.
Yeah. And there in this space, there's really a couple of different ways to do it. We go directly to the employer website, which we see as the source of truth. Employers will post jobs there. When they have jobs, they'll take them down after they fill them. A lot of other competitors will just scrape job boards. That's easier just because you only have to go to a couple different sources to get a mass amount of data. But there's a lot of pollution, duplication of data in there, as well as stale jobs that they might have filled a job 6 months ago and it could still be on those sites. So
Yeah,
it's really going to be the cleanest way that you can look at the labor market by going directly to those companies.
right.
Yep. All right, so let's talk about what's actually in a job listing. So we collect everything that is on the job listing. So going to the raw job title there. So on the example you see here, you see an artificial intelligence engineer. We'll collect the location information so you know exactly where that job is being hired. And something to talk about location. So we have two different ways that you can actually look at location within our data set. So we have multi-location and then single location. So there will be instances where companies will post a job and they'll post it under 10 different locations. We will collect the job and post the job for all 10 of those different locations. So you'll see 10 records for that job with each individual location. So in some cases, that company is actually intending to hire that position in 10 different locations, and sometimes they're not. So we do provide a second field called base hash, which will have the same ID for those 10 different jobs. So if you just wanted to look at that as one job, you could go at the base hash level for it. We collect obviously the company that the job is being posted under. If there's any salary data in our new posted salary job product, we have that data available for you, so you can just go to the salary extracted salary table and take a look at that information. We have the full job description, so if you want to do searches within a job description, you can do that. And then everything else that is posted on the job posting. So if there's education, if there's skills, benefits, there's work that we're doing around there, but that will also be found in the job description itself. The other thing within the job listing that we are adding to it is the time dimension that we're finding the job. So you'll see a date time stamp of when we first find the job. That is the created timestamp. So that's the first time our scrape went out and found that distinct job on the career portal. And then when the job is no longer found on there, we will populate it with a delete date. If the delete date is null, that is your indication that that job is no longer active. We also do provide the direct URL to the job. So if you wanted to go to the job and to the website, you can use that URL and go and check out the job posting. Obviously, if the job has been closed, that URL will not work anymore. But for any jobs that are still active, you can go to that URL and check it out.
Cool.
I think
I'm
this is
gonna try.
probably a good
Sorry,
jump
sorry about
for
that.
our
I was gonna chime in with one
goal.
question there.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Go
And
ahead,
just
Evans.
one comment too, I didn't mean to interrupt, but the I will double down on the timestamp component of that because I do think that's like so unique in itself, right? Where again, if you're thinking about, okay, I'm a researcher, I have some like ability to do some scraping, like if you're not running a consistent job that's checking these websites consistently, you're not able to get that temporal aspect to understand, how long the job's been open or when it's closed, et cetera. So that alone, I think is such an incredible like value prop to, using a provider who thinks about this 24/7 was the comment. And then the question that did come in was how does LinkUp align with things like JOLTS or other even maybe more not government but like providers like CAS, etc. I think you did touch on it a little bit with the fact that it is from the company website and aggregators, but curious your thoughts on JOLTS or other maybe government posted job openings.
Nick, do you want to take that one? I know you've worked a lot with JOLTS and non-farm payroll data.
Yeah, sure. I can jump in here quick. That's a really good question. So as far as like the government data goes, we line up very closely. There is really strong correlation. We have our own JOLTS model that we use to forecast that's publicly available on the LinkUp website. So you can go see that and kind of see our track record. Um, the scale of Jolt is a little bit bigger. We aren't able to scrape every single job in the US. So there is a little bit of a scale difference there. And obviously the methodology is different. But when we're talking about kind of correlation and the end, like trend results and things like that, they are closely aligned. As far as other kind of providers, like Matt said, it really depends on how they're sourcing the data. We believe that kind of the direct indexing leads to a much higher quality data set, much cleaner. And as far as other government data points, it kind of depends on the data point. Like we also do have a model for NFP that performs pretty strongly as well.
Okay. Moving on. So just to kind of talk through the different use cases within the data set here. So showing how granular you can get. So we just went over what's in the job posting itself. So what is important about that is you can see different technologies that are being used within a job description, different skills. So you can get really granular at the job posting itself. If you zoom out a little bit, you can see trends within a company. So if you looked at a specific company, you can see how their hiring practices have kind of trended out over time. You can also look at those companies at the ONET level, so you can see which types of occupations that they're hiring for, and if there's any occupations that have kind of tailed off over the years and other occupations that have, really increased over time. I think, especially during the pandemic, we saw a boom in, sector jobs in a lot of these larger companies where they really went, all in on boosting up the tech side of things. So you could see that within our data set because of the ONET classifications that we have. If you zoom out a little bit more, looking at the different industries, you can just see how those fare over time. So in this graphic, you see, different colors that are signifying different industries. So you can see kind of which industries are the main players within the job market, and then which ones are growing and contracting. And then at a global macro level, you can kind of see the coverage within the data set and where the jobs are. We will say, our data set is a little biased towards the US. That's where we started the business. But over the last couple of years, we really have expanded our coverage globally, especially in Europe and Asia countries.
This is probably a good time to jump in and ask our first poll question if we want to send that out. And that's just around which dimension of the data set do you find the most helpful for your research? So we'll let those results come in.
Evan, are you able to see those results?
Oh yeah,
I
sorry.
could I could read them off here too, Matt.
Okay.
So they just popped up. It looks like most people are found in the job level occupation. So the ONET code very, very valuable, as well as the kind of daily company level counts. No one here is a fan of geography. We got 0 on the geographic information. So don't tell your geography professors that. And then sector aggregation got 1. So kind of spread across the board.
Awesome. Just want to show how the data set has grown over the years. So, as Evan was saying, real powerful thing about this data set is just the vast history that we have going back to 2007. This chart on the left, you can see just the job growth over, about 20 years worth of data. And obviously, since we are adding new companies every month, the data does have a upward bias. But you can still see times within the job economy where things, crash, boom, crash again. So there is a lot that you can still see in the data set, even though there is this upward bias. And then to the right here, you can see the just the growth of the number of companies that we're scraping over time. And our goal into the future is to add 1,000 to 1,500 companies every month. Especially in the international space, we really want to grow our coverage in that space. And then here is just a coverage by region. So you can see here, North America, that is our heaviest covered region. South and Central America, about 4 million historical jobs. So a little lighter there. Europe, which would be our second largest region, has about 30 million historical jobs. Asia, about 20 million jobs. And then Middle East and Africa, 2 million jobs, but hoping to grow the job count there. We actually just had a prospective job board reach out to us that wants us to cover more Middle East countries. So that is an area we're looking to expand as well. All right. And as a product manager, this is my favorite part to talk about is the new features and data sets that we're launching. So, as you've seen come online over the last month, the extracted salary data set. So more and more of these things will be coming live through the remainder of 2026. So we are rolling out a seniority tag. So that'll basically make it easier for the end user to look at either entry level, junior level, mid level, senior level, or executive level jobs within the data set. We are rolling out our own skills taxonomy. And then also in the salary space, we're going to be doing our own modeled salary. So within the extracted salary, we're extracting out when that data is available. So what we've seen over the last, 5 to 7 years of data that we have in there is that coverage of jobs within the US that have salary data has gone from about 5% of jobs to closer to 35% of jobs. And with legislation being passed about price transparency within job postings, we just expect that to continue to grow into the future. With the modeled salary, we'll be actually estimating what we think that company is going to be paying for that job. So that will be much closer to being populated at 100% of jobs because it is an estimate. We are also in a partnership with the University of Maryland, rolling out our AI tag. So any jobs that we think are focused on the development and implementation of AI will get an AI tag. So you'll be able to more easily identify those types of jobs. And then things that we are going to be incorporating from our parent company, Global Data, in the future is firmographic data. So things just like company level data. When was the company started? Where is the headquarters located? Employee count, revenue, things like that. We'll be rolling out a technographic data set. So within the job postings, we can tell which types of technologies these companies are using. So we'll make that available in its own table. And then thematic, so what types of themes are related to the clients as well. And then a new thing that we will be working on is WARN data scraping. So WARN data is when companies need to notify the government of when they have mass layoffs. We're going to incorporate that into the data set as well. Our data has very strong correlation to when companies do layoffs. You'll see a huge drop in job postings, usually within a couple of weeks of before a layoff announcement will come. So this will just be a lot easier to see within the data set when we have these data points available.
I
Awesome. And
think
then
our
Matt,
set. Oh,
yeah,
go ahead,
sorry,
Evan.
I keep cutting you off, Nick. But Matt,
Yeah.
we did launch a poll here as we talk about some of the attributes and things that are coming.
Yes.
And so that's been up. So I think we've seen some come in. But which new attributes or data fields would be most valuable for your research? As people are kind of finalizing their answers on that, we did have one question come through. It might have been relevant to maybe one of your last slide or two slides ago around, as you're thinking about increasing the number of companies that are covered, how do you pull out like more of the global job trends from that? So obviously maybe you can filter down just to the companies that are consistent over that time or things like that. But I'm curious how you generally suggest looking at more macro trends in the data set as the overall number of records continues to increase.
Yeah, Nick, do you want to take that one? I know you've done a little bit of research actually yourself on kind of how to normalize, adding companies and how do we, make sure that the upward bias, you can remove that if you want to.
Yeah, no problem. Kind of like Evan said, we do have everything at the company level, and we let you know once we started scraping these companies. So you can see that there, and you can kind of add and remove companies to your panel across time as you see fit. So if you only wanted to look at the panel from like 2022, that's certainly very easy and possible. Otherwise, we do have some researchers and some firms that use a little bit more advanced techniques like a paired month methodology where they're just making sure that when a new company enters the sample that they wait a few months to make sure it has a baseline and then they will add it to that sample and just look at the month over month, quarter over quarter, or year over year change, things like that.
Awesome. Cool. Let's go ahead and look at the results. I think it usually takes a couple seconds. There we go. All right, Matt, write that down for your roadmap, huh?
Yeah, skills is actually the next thing that we're rolling out, so that is very timely.
Perfect. And then I do have one kind of general question for you too, just before we move on past some of the methodology and kind of schema stuff. Is how do you think about? I'm sure you've seen the question before, but how do you think about like potential bias of the organizations that do post on their own job sites compared to maybe using aggregators or things like that for posting? Like, do you see that maybe biases the data towards certain types of companies or certain types of industries? Or if you know any information around maybe what types of companies might not use their own job site to do their postings or anything like that.
Yeah, so really the kind of gap in our data is there's a lot of small employers that will only post on LinkedIn or certain job boards that we don't have access to that data today. We do on the roadmap intend to actually bring in job board data to kind of supplement this data set. We won't make them the same data set, but it'll be kind of a supplemental data set that will give us greater coverage in those companies that just don't have their own career website. Also, when we expand into other geographies, so there's a lot of countries in Asia that it's actually just common practice to only post on job boards and not have their own career website. So, we are going to have to kind of adapt our standard, but we will always continue to go to directly to the employer websites to get that data. But we might offer supplemental data sets in the future to kind of get those gaps in coverage where companies just aren't posting jobs on their own career website. So
That's
we'll just
awesome.
have to make sure we have a robust deduplication process because
Right.
a lot of the times when clients come to us from our competitors, they'll say the data is just too messy. There's so much duplicate data. We're spending so much time cleaning it up that we're just wasting a lot of our time. So they'll come to us. And so we'll solve those things kind of behind the scenes to make it easy for our clients.
Right. That deduplication piece is interesting because it almost, again, like creates its own value and its own data of knowing, okay, is it true then? You can actually prove that SMBs are only using aggregators or which
Yeah.
type of companies do both, which ones are solely like that's actually as a former marketer now business owner. It's like that's interesting data to know how other people are using
Yes.
these tools.
Yes. So that is something we'll be working on in 2027 and hopefully bringing to market. So once it is available, we'll obviously make it available on Dewey as well.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, let's keep jumping through this. I know we gotta watch the clock here, so we'll keep moving forward.
Yep.
I can jump in here and take over this AI maps part. We'll try to move through this a little quickly, but this is an example of some of the research we've done and worked with that's been created off of our data set. So the University of Maryland's Business School worked very closely with us to classify jobs since 2019 as either technically an AI job or not. So looking into the descriptions and using an LLM to classify those jobs after having built out a training data set. And we're actually going to incorporate this data point as a feature into our data set. So it just really shows kind of the model of close collaboration we're willing to have with researchers, as well as just some really cool insights from this data set. So you can obviously see from some of the charts, like new jobs in AI are absolutely skyrocketing. It's almost becoming table stakes to have these AI skills in the IT world, as we're seeing one out of every three jobs has kind of a technical requirement for these skills. And then University of Maryland took this a step further and wrote a couple white papers about, or a couple research papers about some of the insights they were seeing. So they found that obviously these jobs really started in California, were concentrated in California, but how quickly they kind of dispersed across the United States. That was one of their big findings. They also found that, well, IT jobs in general during this time were declining. The AI related jobs were really surging throughout this period. Um, and this website's publicly available, so you can go out to it and take a look. It goes all the way down to the state level, even the county level. So it just shows really how granular our data can get. Matt, if you want to jump to the next slide. Just a couple more use cases we'll run through. So this is actually the research that Faezeh did. So we won't dive too much into it, but found a very similar thing to what UMD saw with the LinkUp jobs, and that the hiring's not really shrinking yet, but it's starting to change. Go to the next slide here, Matt. And then also that again, like AI implementation, this is very in line with the UMD findings that just these AI related roles are really surging throughout the data set. And you can kind of see that with the forward deployed engineer chart here. And then we'll jump to one more slide and just kind of broadly touch on it's not only AI research you can do with the data set. Obviously, here's a list of a whole bunch of different research papers that have been written with the LinkUp data set. Just to highlight some other things, we've had firms look at like the velocity of hiring and how that can affect profitability. So with our data, you can see how long jobs are posted. That gives you an insight to how quickly or how slowly firms are hiring. You can also see things like we've had firms look into how tax reform affects the labor market using our jobs data set, as well as like degrees that people are getting. Do job postings that increase, does that really affect the degrees that students are looking to obtain? With that, I think I'll pass it over to Faezeh to dive a little bit more into that research we just touched on.
Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. Good morning, everyone, and thank you to the Dewey Data and LinkUp teams for inviting me today. It's actually pretty special to present this work to the people who build the data sets. So if I get anything wrong about the data, I'd love to hear your thoughts afterward. I'm Faezeh Khosravi, a PhD candidate in economics from Georgia State University, and this is a joint work with Dr. Elaine Liu. She is one of our Ramsey Chair, and Dr. Alex Bell, who joined recently from Harvard to GSU. Today, I'll talk about how firms change their hiring after the arrival of generative AI. Instead of looking at one country, we follow firms across 200 economies using real-time job posting data. So let me start with the main questions we are trying to answer in this paper. The first question is straightforward. Did generative AI reduce how much firms hire? Existing studies give mixed answers, and most of that evidence comes from the US and the UK. The second question is one I actually think is more interesting. And it asks, even if firms aren't hiring fewer people overall, are they changing the kinds of jobs they are hiring for? And finally, do these effects look the same in advanced and developing economies? That's a question we still know very little about because almost all of the existing evidence focuses on advanced economies. So about the related research, a quick word on where this fits before I show our main result. A few other papers have looked at the AI and hiring recently, but each one covers a single rich country. One paper looked at 285 million job posting for US and found a 12% drop in exposed roles. The other paper looked at the UK firms and found the most exposed firms pulled back hardest on junior and high-paying roles. And the third study used US payroll data and found a 60% employment drop for young workers aged 22 to 25 in exposed jobs. So based on the existing literature, none of them cover developing countries, and none of them have more than a year or two of data after ChatGPT. That's exactly the gap we are filling by focusing on 200 countries and 3+ years. The data, as you know, come from LinkUp through Dewey data. And one thing I really like about this data set is that it directly collects the job posting from company career page rather than job boards. In total, for our paper, we observed about 160 million postings from 43,000 firm country pairs across 200 economies. And the key part of the design is how we measure AI exposure. So for each firm, we look at the occupations it was hiring for back in 2018 and 2019 before ChatGPT existed. Using those occupation shares together with occupation level AI exposure score, which measure how suitable an occupation's tasks are by generative AI, we build a firm level measure of exposure. And because this measure is based entirely on pre-ChatGPT hiring pattern, it is fixed before the treatment and is not affected by firms' subsequent hiring responses. This makes it much easier for us to interpret the change that we see after ChatGPT as a response to generative AI. rather than something mechanical. Finally, our empirical strategy compares firms to themselves over time while controlling for firm country fixed effect. So we do have another saturated version that also control for firm country, country quarter, and industry quarter fixed effect all together. With that setup in place, let me move to the main findings. So for our paper, we do have like 8 main tables and 20 tables in the appendix, but because of time limitation, I just present a part of the result. Our first outcome is an indicator for whether a firm posts any vacancy in given quarter. This measured the extensive margin of hiring, which is the first row, any posting. So it shows that whether the firm is actively recruiting at all. You can see that for both advanced and developing economy is negative and significant, which means a decline indicates that firms are less likely to advertise vacancies right after the introduction of ChatGPT. To study composition, we use 2 outcomes, which is the third row. The first is the share of postings in occupations with high AI substitution exposure. The second is the average AI exposure of all posted jobs, which is a continuous measure based on occupation level AI exposure scores. And declines in either measure indicates firms are shifting hiring towards occupations that are less exposed to generative AI. So in both advanced and developing economies, firms with higher AI exposure shift away from occupations that are more easily substituted by AI. You can see that the coefficient for both of these composition outcome is negative and significant. Now compare that outcome with the total number of posting using PPML. That's where we start to see a difference between advanced and developing economy. In advanced economies, the decline in hiring is relatively small, approximately 2%, while in developing economies is much larger. And our final composition outcome is the share of high skill postings defined as the fraction of vacancies classified as high skill. This allows us to test whether firms are shifting their hiring toward more skilled workers. So for these specific outcomes, we expect that the coefficient should be positive, and you can see that it's positive for both advanced and developing economies. So the main takeaway from this table is that AI changed what firms hire for much more consistently than how much they hire. And the composition effect is global, while the volume effect is much more concentrated in developing economies. Overall, that naturally raises another question. When do these changes actually begin after the introduction of ChatGPT? That's where we use even study figures. So we assume that before ChatGPT was released, firms with different level of AI exposure follows very similar trends. That's exactly what we like to see before the treatment. By looking at the 2 figures, the blue one shows advanced and the red one shows developing economies, you can see that right around the release of ChatGPT after the November of 2022, and from that point on, firms with higher exposure steadily reduce the share of AI substitutable jobs in their hiring. And what's important is that the gap doesn't disappear after a few quarters, but it keeps growing over the next 3 years. So it doesn't look like firms reacting to the excitement around a new technology, but it looks much more like a persistent change in hiring strategy. The next question is that whether this change lasts over time or eventually fade out. So this table asks a very simple question. Is this just an initial reaction to ChatGPT, or is this something more permanent? To answer that, we estimate the effect separately for each year post ChatGPT. What we find is actually the opposite of a novelty effect. If you look at the numbers for both high subshare and AI mix for advanced and developing economy, instead of becoming smaller over time, the estimates become larger. And by 2025, the effect is roughly twice as large as it was during the first year after ChatGPT. And we see that pattern is the same in both advanced and developing economies. So the evidence suggests that firms aren't simply experimenting with AI. They are gradually changing their hiring strategy as AI become more integrated into their operations. So far, we just compare firms across countries. Next, I want to ask what happens inside each firm, specifically multinational firms. So for this analysis, we restrict our sample to multinational firms. And this table asks a slightly different question. What happens within the same multinational firms? Think about a company like Amazon or Microsoft that hires in both advanced and developing economies. We ask whether that same company changes its hiring in the same way across its different location. And the answer for the composition outcome, which are the last two columns, is yes, at least again when it comes to the composition of hiring. So by looking at the coefficient for exposure post-developing, the interaction term for developing economies is very close to zero and statistically insignificant, which means the same firm shifts away from AI substitutable jobs at roughly the same pace in both regions. Again, the difference shows up in hiring volume. By looking at the second columns, total posting, you can see that the effect is negative and significant, which means the same multinational reduces the total number of job posting much more in its developing country operations. Overall, the evidence suggests that what firms hire for is a centralized corporate decision, while how much they hire still depends on local conditions. And the final question is why the adjustment is stronger, why the adjustment appears somewhat stronger in developing economies. For answering this question, we considered several possible explanations. We thought maybe firms in developing economies simply have a different occupational mix, but it doesn't show anything and it ruled out. The other scenario was maybe AI adaptation is higher, maybe it's about education level, or maybe labor is just cheaper. But all of these scenarios rule out. We test each of those possibilities and none of them consistently explain the pattern. But the only factor that does stand out was employment protection legislation. So in countries where it is easier for firms to adjust their workforce, the shift in hiring composition happens more quickly. While in countries with a stronger employment protection like France or Italy, firms face higher adjustment costs. So the transition appears to happen more gradually. And now I'm going to finish with the main four takeaway from our paper. The first is that generative AI is changing what firm hire for more consistently than how much they hire. Across countries, the clearest response is a shift away from occupations that are more easily substituted by AI. Second, this looks like a firm level strategy rather than a collection of local labor market responses. The same multinational firms make very similar composition adjustment across its operations. And third, these changes don't fade over time. If anything, they become stronger over the 3 years we observe after ChatGPT. And finally, one of the more surprising findings is that developing economies experience much larger growth in AI complementary hiring. That suggests AI may actually help relax some existing skill constraint in those labor markets. And if time allows, I do have another figure. So for this figure, we are asking whether these findings depend on one particular sample or one particular way of measuring AI exposure. So we re-estimate the model in a number of different ways. We exclude the US, we restrict the sample to Europe. We focus only on multinationals, use alternative exposure measures, and change how we classify AI exposed occupations. And across all of those different specifications, the estimate stays remarkably stable. You can see that it's still negative and significant. So the main composition result isn't being driven by any single modeling choice, which means that our finding is credible and valid. Thank you so much for your attention, and I'd be happy to take any feedback, comments.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for presenting. It's awesome to jump through this. And I know there's a lot more in here too that we didn't get to for the sake of time. And so if anyone does have any questions, Kelly has posted my email and I'm happy to forward anything to Faezeh that comes up. And similarly, any questions to the LinkUp team, you're welcome to forward to me or just post in the Dewey discussions tab, and our data team is on standby to get your questions answered. But I think we're going to wrap this up quickly just because we're already a little bit over on time. But again, any questions are welcome. But I really appreciate everyone for joining today, and especially our panelists and Faezeh for joining to present your research. Always really interesting to dive a little bit deeper into the data sets for myself, and hope we kind of got under the hood a little bit more to unpack some new insights. And so we'll wrap it up there. But thank you, everyone. And if you ever have feedback on anything that we can do on the Dewey Data platform, please don't hesitate to reach out as well. But yeah, thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.